Grab a coffee, take a seat, and let's just have a real, unfiltered conversation for a minute. Do you ever open your eyes in the morning and realize that before your feet have even touched the bedroom floor, your absolute core is already profoundly exhausted? I'm talking about that feeling where it's as if your physical body woke up, but your soul decided to stay in bed, completely clocked out and utterly unwilling to participate in the day. Let's get something straight right out of the gate. That is not a normal state of human existence. I know. We live in a society that constantly gaslights us into believing that chronic, bone-deep fatigue is just the standard price of admission for being a functioning adult. Welcome to your 30s. Here's your back pain and your existential dread, right? But it's not true. You aren't just dealing with a bad night of sleep or a busy week at the office. You are fundamentally depleted. It feels exactly as though someone has hooked an invisible, microscopic siphon up to your life force and has been quietly draining your vitality, drop by drop, for the last 5 years. And the crazy part? You've just surrendered to the process. You are walking around wearing the biological suit of a fully functioning human being, but you're operating on the degraded, heavily compromised battery life of a 2014 smartphone. The kind that instantly shuts down from 40% to 0 just because the wind blew too hard. And here is the most terrifyingly messed up part of this entire phenomenon. Absolutely nobody is sounding the alarm. Nobody is pausing the chaotic machinery of the world to say, hey, wait a minute. The fact that an entire generation of people feels completely hollowed out and emotionally flatlined by 1 p.m. is a massive systemic crisis. Instead of addressing the root cause, what do? We drown our exhaustion in venti iced lattes. We scroll mindlessly past our own internal alarms. We slap a beautifully curated aesthetic motivational quote over our existential dread, which is basically like putting a cheap, flimsy Band-Aid over a gaping arterial wound, and we just keep forcing ourselves to march forward. Listen, I need you to hear this. You are not experiencing this crushing burnout because you are inherently weak, fragile, or incapable of handling life. You're experiencing burnout because you have spent years literally setting yourself on fire to keep the people around you warm. You've been running your engine at maximum capacity, trying to illuminate everyone else's path, while your own internal flame melted into an unrecognizable puddle of wax 3 or 4 years ago. We really need to stop calling this being busy. What you're experiencing transcends a heavy schedule. This is a profound cellular-level exhaustion of the spirit. This is the tragic modern reality of brushing your teeth with one hand while rapidly scrolling through short-form videos with the other, simply because the concept of standing in absolute silence with your own unfiltered thoughts has become psychologically terrifying. This is sitting through profound, beautiful, or devastating moments of life. Moments that objectively should have moved you to tears or made you double over in genuine laughter, and feeling absolutely nothing but a hollow, echoing blankness inside your chest. This is the reality of lying awake at 3:14 a.m., bathed in the blue light of your screen, engaging in aggressive doom scrolling. And let's be honest, you aren't doing this because you possess a deep, passionate midnight interest in global macroeconomic trends or random internet drama. You're doing it because your nervous system is absolutely terrified of stillness. To your deeply overstimulated brain, physical and mental stillness feels like an impending confrontation. It feels like the moment the music finally stops in a game of musical chairs, and you suddenly have to look at the massive pile of unprocessed emotions you've been ignoring for years. And honestly, who on earth has the cognitive bandwidth to deal with that? So, you adopt the universal camouflage. You program your mouth to automatically output the phrase, "Oh, I'm doing fine, just a little tired," every single time a friend, coworker, or family member asks how you are holding up. You say this especially when you are absolutely, unequivocally not fine. You deploy this lie because you know deep down in your gut that if you were to actually pull the curtain back, if you were to vocalize exactly how overwhelmingly numb, furious, exhausted, and desperately empty you truly feel, it might pull the single thread that unravels the entire carefully constructed sweater of your life. You've been holding your entire universe together with metaphorical duct tape, sheer willpower, and severely delayed emotional processing. The absolute last thing your fragile ecosystem can handle right now is someone tugging on that thread. Cultural narratives have convinced us to lovingly label this miserable existence as simply adulting. But I have a much more accurate clinical term for it. It is chronic self-abandonment dressed up in business casual attire. And the grand tragedy of our educational and social systems is that absolutely no one hands you a manual on how to repair this specific type of damage. Society doesn't teach you how to heal. Society exclusively teaches you how to produce. They teach you how to optimize your workflow, how to maximize your efficiency, how to adopt the grind set, and how to violently monetize every single one of your peaceful hobbies. The prevailing narrative constantly whispers in your ear, do not dare rest. Optimize your recovery. Oh, you like gardening on the weekends to clear your head. You should turn that into an e-commerce side hustle. You are currently walking around with 87 unclosed browser tabs open in your psychological hard drive. You have genuinely forgotten what the baseline frequency of peace actually feels like in your nervous system. Think about it. The only time you take a full, deep, diaphragmatic breath anymore is when your phone battery unexpectedly dies on a long commute, and you are forcibly subjected to staring out a window at passing trees like it's the year 2003. Here is an incredibly hard, scientifically backed truth that we need to swallow today. A significant portion of us aren't experiencing clinical depression. We are experiencing severe, chronic overstimulation. Your central nervous system is entirely fried, locked in an endless loop of sympathetic activation. Your energy hasn't mysteriously vanished into the ether. It is actively being robbed from you. It's being continuously hijacked by the relentless ping of algorithmic notifications, by the manufactured fake urgency of corporate emails, and by the emotional vampires in your social circle who actively drain the life out of your body while flashing a polite, friendly smile. Your energy is being siphoned by that relentless, abusive inner critic in your head that constantly whispers, "You are falling behind. Everybody else is doing more," while you are quite literally hanging on to your sanity by a fraying, microscopic thread. And you know what the absolute most tragic part of this entire scenario is? We've adapted to the misery. We have completely normalized functioning at 10% capacity. We've taken our chronic burnout and woven it into the very fabric of our personalities. We make self-deprecating jokes about our exhaustion. We share highly relatable memes about wanting to sleep for 1,000 years, and we laugh off the pain in group chats. But resting right beneath that thick layer of sarcastic humor is a deeply exhausted human being. who literally cannot recall the last time they woke up feeling genuinely rested, intensely inspired, or authentically excited about the future. We try to soften the blow by referring to it as a funk, a rough patch, or just a bad mental health month. But let's be brutally honest with each other right now. This is no longer a temporary phase. This has become your baseline reality. This is your life. And something fundamental has to shatter and change. Because if you don't intervene, if you continue to allow these silent, invisible energy thieves to casually stroll in and out of your psychological living room completely unchecked, you are going to blink, wake up a decade from now, and realize with absolute horror that you spent the best years of your life merely surviving the days, not actually inhabiting them. You'll look into a bathroom mirror and stare into the eyes of a stranger. You won't recognize the hollowed-out version of yourself who quietly gave up on dreaming, who systematically stopped feeling deeply, and who completely stopped showing up for their own narrative. Let me be abundantly clear about my intentions here. I am not sitting here attempting to sell you a $50 aesthetic daily planner. I'm not pitching a magical 10-step morning routine involving freezing ice baths and overpriced green juice. I'm not trying to sell you a premium subscription to a meditation app that plays artificial rainforest sounds. I am just here to share the unvarnished truth with you as a friend. Your profound exhaustion is not a symptom of moral weakness. Your emotional numbness is not a character flaw or a failure. Your chronic burnout is not your permanent identity. It is a highly sophisticated biological warning sign. It is a blindingly bright, flashing red light on the dashboard of your physical and psychological vehicle. And if you continue to put black tape over that warning light and ignore it for long enough, your biological vessel will eventually make the decision for you, and it will violently force you to pull over and stop. So, before we dive any deeper into the mechanics of this crisis, I need you to halt everything you are doing for just a fraction of a second. Breathe. I mean, actually, physically expand your lungs. Inhale deeply through your nose, expanding your diaphragm, and exhale slowly through your mouth. Do you feel that? That tiny, microscopic flicker of presence? That brief, momentary anchor to the present reality? That is the authentic, unbroken version of you that is still buried deep inside the rubble. That version of you is still alive, still kicking, and still fiercely fighting for oxygen. And we are absolutely not going to let that version of you slip away into the void. Not today. Not on my watch. We are going to meticulously dissect exactly who and what has been treating your precious daily energy like a free, unlimited open bar. Are you ready to look at the ugly truth? The 5 apex predators stealing your energy. All right, it's time to get uncomfortably, brutally honest about the architecture of our daily lives. There are 5 primary energy thieves operating within your ecosystem right now. And the most painful pill to swallow is this. You aren't just a passive victim to these thieves. You're actively opening the front door, handing them the master keys to your psyche, brewing them a fresh cup of tea, and politely asking if the temperature in the room is comfortable for them. Let's systematically break down these massive leaks in your system. Thief number 1, the disease of chronic accommodation. Oh yes, we're starting with the heavy hitter.
You know the drill.
You consistently force the word yes out of your mouth when every single cell in your body is violently screaming, absolutely not. You drag your exhausted body to social brunches that you secretly despise. You spend precious cognitive bandwidth carefully crafting the perfect replies to text messages from people you genuinely resent. You paste a rigid, painful smile on your face while executing favors that plunge you deep into emotional debt. And you have the audacity to label this self-destruction as kindness. But let me drop a devastating truth bomb on you. Systematically sacrificing your own internal peace simply to ensure that someone else never has to experience a moment of mild inconvenience is not kindness. It's a trauma response. In psychology, it's known as the fawn response, a subconscious survival mechanism where you attempt to avoid conflict by aggressively appeasing potential threats. Every single time you abandon your own boundaries to accommodate someone else, a measurable piece of your vital energy packs its bags and permanently walks out the door. And the most deeply messed up irony of this entire dynamic? Half of the individuals you are bending your spine backward to accommodate would barely even register a blip on their radar if you suddenly stopped. You've played the Oscar-winning role of the dependable, easygoing friend so flawlessly for so long that you have genuinely forgotten you were not put on this earth to serve as an unpaid emotional butler for everyone you meet. You operate under the tragic delusion that if you can just successfully manage everyone else's happiness, you will eventually be granted permission to rest. But the mathematics of people-pleasing do not work that way. All it does is drain your reservoir exponentially faster. Thief number 2. Performative busyness. Look at you. Your digital calendar looks like a complex game of Tetris on expert mode. Your daily to-do list is meticulously color-coded by priority. You literally have specialized productivity apps installed on your phone to manage your other productivity apps. You are constantly in motion, generating a massive amount of friction. But you aren't actually generating any forward velocity. You are the equivalent of a passenger frantically rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic while the ship is taking on water. You'll happily spend 3 hours aggressively clearing out promotional emails from your inbox, but you will completely avoid dedicating 20 minutes to the massive, terrifying dream that actually sets your soul on fire. You'll binge-watch hours of aesthetic, day-in-the-life productivity vloggers on YouTube as if their routines are ancient religious texts. Yet you haven't taken a single, tangible step toward your own actual goals in 6 months. Why do we do this? Because the illusion of productivity feels infinitely safer than the vulnerability of true purpose. If you can manufacture the appearance of being overwhelmingly busy, you never have to sit still long enough to feel the terrifying sensation of being profoundly lost. You never have to confront the paralyzing reality that maybe, just maybe, you are deeply terrified of failing if you actually try. So, you trap yourself in an endless, exhausting hamster wheel of performative motion, burning astronomical amounts of cognitive fuel, specifically to avoid doing the real, meaningful work. Thief number 3. The algorithmic envy machine. This specific thief is a highly lethal soul killer, brilliantly disguised as daily inspiration. You unlock your phone, tap an icon, and suddenly your actual, messy, real life feels like a grainy, low-budget indie film compared to the high-definition, multi-million-dollar blockbuster trailers of everyone else's existence. You see that girl you barely spoke to in high school, casually traveling through the Amalfi Coast. You see that guy you dated for 3 months 5 years ago standing in front of his new startup, sporting a physique that looks like it was sculpted by Renaissance artists. And then there's you. You're sitting on your couch in stained sweatpants, eating lukewarm leftover pasta straight out of a Tupperware container, spiraling into a deep existential crisis, wondering where your timeline went so catastrophically wrong. But here is the massive psychological trap you are falling into. Evolutionary biology proves that the human brain was only designed to compare its social standing to a local tribe of roughly 150 people. You are currently forcing your Paleolithic brain to engage in upward social comparison against 8 billion heavily filtered, perfectly lit, surgically altered digital avatars. You are viciously comparing your unedited, chaotic, behind-the-scenes footage to someone else's highly curated, aggressively edited highlight reel. They absolutely do not post the photos of themselves having a hyperventilating panic attack on the bathroom tiles at 2 a.m. They don't upload the crushing imposter syndrome, the crippling financial debt, or the hollow loneliness. And yet, you ruthlessly measure your entire baseline worth against their artificial filter. Theodore Roosevelt famously said that comparison is the thief of joy. What he failed to mention is that it is also a massive parasite on your energy. Every single time you scroll, subconsciously shrink your posture, and internally criticize your own existence, a vital piece of your soul completely stops showing up for the day. Thief number 4. Silent grievances. Do you ever walk through your day feeling a dense, invisible, suffocating weight pressing down on your chest? You probably assume you're just sleep-deprived. You aren't. That heavy sensation is the accumulated density of thousands of resentments you never had the courage to vocalize. You allow people to casually step all over your boundaries. You continuously deploy the phrase, "Oh, don't worry about it, it's totally fine," when it is aggressively, objectively, not fine. You swallow your authentic truth so frequently and so deeply that you have become profoundly emotionally constipated. You operate under the noble delusion that maintaining artificial harmony and keeping the peace makes you a highly evolved, mature person. But clinical psychology proves that the body keeps the exact score of everything you suppress. Bottling up justifiable anger doesn't make the anger magically evaporate into the ether. It simply transforms you into a walking, high-pressure psychological boiler with a pleasant smile painted on the outside. Every single unspoken boundary, every swallowed grievance, creates a microscopic leak in your energy reservoir. It festers in your subconscious. It creates endless, exhausting neurological loops in your mind. It is the exact reason you are jolted awake at 2:15 a.m., vividly replaying a mundane conversation from 3 weeks ago, obsessing over the exact boundary you should have established but lacked the courage to enforce. You aren't exhausted because the physical mechanics of life are inherently hard. You're exhausted because you are actively carrying the emotional weight of 47 unsent, brutally honest text messages deep within your soul. Thief number 5. Environmental overload. Yes, I am absolutely going there. The physical and mental mess surrounding you is actively, aggressively draining your life force. I'm not merely talking about the massive, towering pile of clean laundry sitting on that one specific chair in your bedroom that has slowly morphed into a permanent piece of structural furniture. I'm not just talking about the 72 open browser tabs you refuse to close, or the 14,000 unread promotional emails sitting in your inbox that you desperately pretend do not exist. I am talking about the suffocating mental clutter, the vast graveyard of unmade decisions, the ghosts of half-started, abandoned projects, the relentless, chaotic noise occupying both your physical space and your cognitive bandwidth. Neuroscientists at Princeton University actually conducted studies proving that excessive visual stimuli constantly compete for your brain's processing capacity. Clutter isn't just passively sitting there, it is loudly, continuously whispering to your subconscious, "You are fundamentally behind schedule." Clutter serves as a relentless physical monument to every single task you have failed to complete. It pulls your finite attention into 100 fragmented, useless directions until your prefrontal cortex simply throws its hands up in surrender, completely shuts down, and aggressively chooses to turn on Netflix instead. And so you sit there, in a state of total paralysis, half watching a show you don't even like, half scrolling through a feed you don't care about, feeling completely and utterly exhausted. Because chaos, even when it doesn't make a physical sound, is deafeningly loud to your nervous system. Look at me. I am absolutely not here to sit on a high horse and judge you. I am you. We are in the same boat. I have lived this exact reality. I've spent years drowning under the crushing weight of obligations I never actually wanted to agree to. I've run my physical and mental engines on pure, toxic fumes, while violently projecting the illusion that I had everything perfectly under control. I have surrendered massive, vital pieces of my own identity to habits and people I mistakenly believed were just mandatory parts of the adult experience. But here is the chilling truth we must face together. These 5 thieves don't create small, manageable leaks in your system. They represent massive, catastrophic, structural holes in your soul's gas tank. And you've been casually driving your vehicle down the highway at 80 miles per hour, with the dashboard warning lights aggressively flashing red for the last 5 years. So, if you've been staring at the ceiling wondering, "Why do I feel so incredibly heavy? Why am I waking up exhausted after 9 hours of sleep? Why does genuine, spontaneous joy feel like a distant, faded childhood memory instead of a tangible daily emotion?" I need you to understand that it is not because you are fundamentally flawed. It's because of the staggering amount of invisible weight you have been carrying. It's the sheer volume of toxicity you have been tolerating. It is the parasitic habits you have permitted to steal your vital spark while continuously gaslighting yourself into believing this is fine. It is not fine. But the incredibly beautiful news is that it absolutely does not have to remain this way. Next, we are going to violently rip the toxic, weaponized label of lazy right off your chest, and we are going to scientifically examine what is actually happening inside your biology. Because you aren't lazy. You are hemorrhaging capacity. You aren't a broken machine. You are a deeply exhausted human being who is tired of fighting massive, invisible wars that absolutely no one else gets to see. Let's dismantle that lie right now. The myth of apathy. You are not lazy, you are leaking. Let me broadcast this statement at maximum volume for the people in the back rows, and more importantly, for the relentlessly abusive voices echoing inside your own head. You are not lazy. You aren't inherently unmotivated. You aren't a genetic failure. You are leaking energy like a shattered porcelain cup. You are the biological equivalent of a smartphone that remains hopelessly stuck at 17% battery capacity, regardless of how many hours you leave it plugged into the wall. Have you ever attempted to fill a large bucket with water when the bottom is riddled with puncture holes? It fundamentally doesn't matter how aggressively you pour fresh water into the top. The water will never, ever stay. That bucket is the exact state of your daily energy. That is your intrinsic motivation. That is your sheer will to simply exist on certain days. It's not that your drive and passion magically evaporated or never existed in the first place. It is that your drive is continuously, uncontrollably leaking out through dozens of microscopic, invisible stress fractures that you have been far too exhausted to even identify, let alone repair. And the external world, man, society absolutely revels in looking down its nose and labeling you as lazy. But here is the massive context that society entirely fails to see. They don't see you aggressively doom-scrolling for 4 consecutive hours, not because you are apathetic and don't care about your life, but because your prefrontal cortex is so severely overstimulated and your dopamine receptors are so profoundly undernourished that your brain literally no longer possesses the neurological mechanism required to rest without the aid of a glowing digital pacifier. They don't see the massive pile of unfolded laundry sitting in the corner of your bedroom, haunting your peripheral vision like a terrifying ghost of your own inadequacy. To an outside observer, that laundry looks like laziness. To you, it is the physical manifestation of executive dysfunction and neurological paralysis. They don't see you staring blankly at your messaging app for 25 minutes, desperately attempting to formulate a simple 3-word reply to a friend, while feeling as though your fingers have been injected with liquid cement. They don't see you deploying dark, self-deprecating humor about how utterly dead inside you feel, because deploying that humor is the single, fragile coping mechanism preventing the void from swallowing you whole. You aren't lazy. You are deeply, profoundly tired. But you aren't just "I need a nap" tired. You are "my soul needs a 6-month vacation in a sensory deprivation tank" tired. And it is critical that we establish the absolute difference between the two. True laziness is the luxury of genuine apathy. Laziness is the authentic feeling of, "I simply do not care." But that is not you. Your core problem is the exact opposite. You care entirely too much about absolutely everything, regarding everyone, at all hours of the day. You carry a dense, suffocating layer of guilt on your shoulders, as if it were a mandatory component of your biological identity. You painstakingly replay totally mundane social interactions in your head as if they were complex, high-stakes crime scenes requiring forensic analysis. You ruthlessly hold yourself to impossible, perfectionist standards that you would never, in a million years, impose upon your absolute worst enemy. Let me share a deeply personal reality with you. There was a specific era in my life where I didn't physically cross the threshold of my front door for 4 consecutive days. Not because I had no desire to participate in society, but because I physically and psychologically could not generate the momentum. I had massive projects to complete. I had abundant free time. I had impeccably structured to-do lists, but I could not force my body to move. Every single minor action, from taking a shower to opening a laptop, felt like attempting to swim a marathon through a pool of wet, hardening cement. I sat there aggressively berating myself, continuously asking, what the hell is fundamentally broken inside of me? And the clinical, objective answer was this: I was entirely depleted. Not because I had spent the week doing physically exhausting manual labor, but because I had spent the last 5 years functioning under immense emotional debt. I had been systematically suppressing my own needs to project an aura of unshakable stability for everyone else. I had been desperately attempting to remain highly functional in a deeply dysfunctional environment. I had tightened the straps on my metaphorical mask so fiercely that it was giving my soul a chronic migraine. What I was experiencing was not the moral failing of laziness. It was the catastrophic collapse of emotional debt. The human nervous system is not a magical, infinite well. You can only suppress, mask, and endure so much friction before your biological system forces a massive overdraft. And when that overdraft finally occurs, your autonomic nervous system steps in and violently pulls the emergency brake. It shuts down your access to motivation, hyperfocus, and joy in order to conserve baseline survival energy. Suddenly, the simple, mundane act of brushing your teeth feels like preparing to deliver a heavily researched, high-stakes TED Talk. So, we need to completely eradicate the shame surrounding this. We must immediately cease labeling the collapse of our bandwidth as laziness when the objective biological reality is severe nervous system overload. We have to stop viciously blaming ourselves for burning out when we were raised in a society that never provided us with a single lesson on how to adequately fuel our internal engines. And this is where the analogy becomes painfully crystal clear. When your expensive smartphone refuses to charge past 17%, what do? You absolutely don't start screaming at the glass screen, calling the phone worthless, weak, and undisciplined. You immediately begin troubleshooting the environment. You inspect the charging cable for fraying. You test the electrical outlet. You analyze the power source. But when your own biological and psychological battery refuses to hold a charge, you skip the environmental troubleshooting entirely and immediately resort to vicious self-abuse. You label yourself as defective, fragile, and chronically lazy. Have you ever stopped for a fraction of a second to consider that perhaps the fundamental issue is not your internal hardware, but the profoundly toxic, nutrient-deficient inputs you have been relentlessly feeding your mind? We exist within a hyper-capitalist, brutally demanding societal structure that aggressively celebrates and monetizes output, but possesses absolute amnesia regarding the necessity of input. The cultural drumbeat is relentless. Post the content. Launch the startup. Build the personal brand. Hustle while your competitors sleep. Meanwhile, your neglected, starved soul is sitting quietly in the corner of your mind, gently suggesting, hey, maybe we could step outside and physically touch the bark of a tree. Do you remember what spontaneous joy feels like? And your culturally conditioned response is to aggressively yell, "Shut up and sit down. We have 14 unread emails to process." Do you see the catastrophic flaw in this architecture? You are violently bleeding vital energy every single day, attempting to function at an elite level, within a systemic structure that only assigns value to the tangible products you can produce. And the most insidious, devastating part of this cycle is that you eventually internalize the lie. You begin to mathematically equate your fundamental worth as a human being with your daily level of productivity. You adopt the deeply toxic belief that genuine rest is a luxury that must be violently earned through back-breaking labor. You begin to view the act of doing absolutely nothing as a moral failure. But here is the unvarnished, biological truth that you desperately need to absorb into your bones today. Rest is not a transactional reward. Rest is an absolute, non-negotiable, physiological requirement. Especially when your spirit has been silently running ultra-marathons in the dark for years. So, what is the tactical protocol moving forward? We immediately cease weaponizing our fatigue against ourselves. We completely stop treating our exhaustion as a deep character flaw. Instead, we pivot to a state of clinical, radical curiosity. We ask the hard diagnostic questions. Where specifically are the leaks in my hull? What toxic relationships, jobs, or digital habits am I pouring massive amounts of energy into that yield absolutely zero return on investment? What devastating, unprocessed trauma am I forcefully holding down in my subconscious that is actively eating my vitality alive? What deeply ingrained fictional narrative am I repeating to myself that keeps me locked in a prison of guilt rather than bathing in the freedom of grace? Because if you have been feeling stuck, paralyzed, or entirely emotionally numb, I promise you on everything that matters, it is not because you are a broken machine. It is because you are profoundly exhausted from being incredibly strong, enduring monumental pressure in ways that absolutely no one on this earth ever stopped to thank you for. I see you. I see you continuing to wake up, continuing to show up, continuing to force air into your lungs and push through the fog. That is not the definition of laziness. That is the definition of staggering, raw, breathtaking resilience. Now, we need to shine a harsh, unforgiving spotlight on the specific coping mechanisms you mistakenly believe are keeping you afloat, but are actually accelerating your sinking. We're going to expose the little daily habits that masquerade as safety blankets, but are, in reality, slow-acting neurochemical poisons. Because genuine healing can only commence when you achieve perfect, undeniable vision. And once you finally see these traps for what they truly are, you will never be able to unsee them. Brace yourself. The counterfeit cures. What you think is helping is actually destroying you. All right, it's time to dismantle the most sneaky, insidious part of this entire burnout equation: the counterfeit cures. We need to talk directly about the specific actions you take that you absolutely swear are helping you cope with the chaos, but are mathematically and biologically making your exhaustion infinitely worse. And listen to me, there is zero judgment here. I have personally engaged in every single one of these destructive behaviors. I have fiercely defended them to my friends. I used to proudly declare, "These are my necessary survival tools," while simultaneously wondering why my mental health resembled a decaying, unwatered houseplant. Let's systematically expose the lies we tell ourselves, starting with the biggest modern illusion. Lie number 1: digital sedation is a form of rest. I know exactly what your nightly routine looks like. You are lying horizontal in your bed. You are officially winding down. The ambient lights are turned off, and your smartphone screen is aggressively illuminating your face with blue light, like a scene out of a dystopian sci-fi thriller. You promise yourself, just one more short video, one more witty social media thread, one more 5-minute hyper-focused rabbit hole analyzing why the global economy is destined to collapse, why microplastics are in the rainwater, and, oh look, that girl who sat behind you in middle school algebra just got married for the second time. You classify this behavior as rest, simply because your physical limbs are temporarily stationary. But neurologically, inside your skull, your brain is sprinting at maximum velocity as if it is being hunted through a pitch-black cornfield by an apex predator. Your nervous system is absolutely fried. By consuming this relentless stream of chaotic, unpredictable, often threatening information, you are continuously activating the exact same sympathetic fight-or-flight survival circuits that your ancient ancestors utilized to evade literal physical attacks from wild animals. Except today, the immediate threat isn't a bear. It's a highly toxic, polarized Reddit thread. And then you have the audacity to wake up the next morning feeling like you were hit by a freight train, wondering why you're so exhausted. It's because your physical body laid down on a mattress for 8 hours, but your brain was running a stress-induced marathon the entire night. Lie number 2. Catastrophizing is a form of preparation. Listen, I can already hear your defensive rebuttal forming. I am not an overthinker. I am just a highly analytical planner. I am simply trying to be prepared for all outcomes. No, you aren't. You are actively attempting to manipulate and control the uncontrollable future, using severe anxiety as your primary tool. You are obsessively rehearsing every single, highly improbable, worst-case catastrophic scenario in your head, as if you are training for an Olympic event in suffering. You lie awake, staring at the ceiling at midnight, meticulously scripting and acting out heated arguments that have never actually occurred, with people who probably haven't thought about you in 6 months. That is not strategic planning. That is the definition of psychological self-torture, dressed up in a cheap suit of logic. Overthinking operates on a deeply flawed subconscious promise. It convinces your brain that if you can just generate enough intense worry about a potential future event, you will somehow build a magical shield that prevents the pain from actually hurting when it arrives. But the brutal reality of this habit is that you are simply choosing to live through the devastating pain twice. You experience the crushing trauma once, entirely inside your imagination, and then you experience it a second time if reality actually decides to punch you. And guess what? Life is going to inevitably punch you. And all of those hundreds of hours of agonizing overthinking did absolutely nothing to soften the blow. It just drained the energy you desperately needed to recover from it. Lie number 3. Stimulant abuse is a viable substitute for sleep. I genuinely love coffee. I appreciate the ritual, the taste, the warmth. But we need to have a serious biological intervention, because at a certain threshold, it completely ceases to be a pleasant morning beverage and mutates into a desperate chemical coping mechanism for severely untreated burnout. You are no longer thriving. You are barely surviving on dark roasted bean juice and sheer, unadulterated panic. You need to understand the actual psychopharmacology of what you are doing. Caffeine does not magically manufacture new, usable energy from thin air. It simply aggressively blocks the adenosine receptors in your brain, the specific receptors responsible for telling your nervous system that you are dangerously fatigued. You aren't energized. You are just chemically blindfolding your brain, forcing your body to completely ignore its own desperate, agonizing screams for cellular repair and rest. And when that chemical blindfold inevitably wears off and the adenosine floods your system all at once, the resulting crash is not just a standard dip in energy. It is your soul violently face-planting into a concrete wall. Caffeine is a masterful illusionist. It masks the glaring symptoms while actively deepening the root cause. You aren't fixing your profound fatigue. You are simply throwing a temporary, caffeinated blanket over a raging fire and praying it extinguishes itself. Lie number 4. Emotional dissociation is the same as healing. Let's get incredibly, uncomfortably real for a second. You operate under the assumption that just because you are no longer actively sobbing on the floor, you have successfully healed. But the absence of crying does not indicate the presence of healing. It merely indicates that you have successfully achieved a state of profound numbness. You have emotionally sedated yourself. And humanity has invented a spectacular, terrifying array of methods to achieve this numbness. We use the endless scroll of social media. We consume highly processed foods when we aren't remotely biologically hungry. We aggressively binge-watch 7 seasons of a television show specifically so we can drown out the terrifying acoustics of our own silence. We weaponize self-deprecating humor, turning our genuine trauma into a punchline so that no one ever gets close enough to ask if we are actually okay. We intentionally overbook our schedules, maintaining a state of frantic busyness so we never have to endure the agonizing terror of sitting perfectly still with our own thoughts. But let me be absolutely clear. Numbing is not a form of rest. It is high-level emotional avoidance masquerading under excellent PR and branding. As the researcher Brené Brown famously stated, you cannot selectively numb emotion. When you numb the dark, painful, messy stuff, you simultaneously numb your capacity to feel the light, the joy, and the connection. Genuine healing inherently requires raw, unfiltered feeling. Even the profoundly messy, incredibly ugly, highly inconvenient emotions, especially those. Lie number 5. The good vibes only trap is a healthy mindset. I swear to the heavens, if one more person looks you in the eye while your entire world is actively burning to the ground and tells you to just look on the bright side and stay positive, you have my full permission to walk away. Toxic positivity is arguably one of the most culturally acceptable, highly destructive energy drainers in modern existence. You are biologically and psychologically allowed to feel the crushing weight of your sadness. You are authorized to be furiously angry, profoundly confused, and entirely hopeless for a period of time. Taking a deeply painful psychological breakdown and violently slapping a superficial, plastic smile over it does not make the trauma evaporate into the cosmos. It forcefully buries it alive in your subconscious. And emotions that are buried alive do not simply die peacefully. They ferment, they mutate, they grow incredibly sharp teeth. They claw their way back to the surface at 3 a.m., disguised as a panic attack, when your conscious defenses are entirely down. You cannot manifest profound inner peace while simultaneously gaslighting your own legitimate pain. Authentic, sustainable healing begins with radical, uncompromising honesty. It begins with the courage to look in the mirror and declare, "I am absolutely not okay right now, and that is a perfectly acceptable state to exist in for this moment. Look at me." Engaging in these 5 behaviors does not make you a weak, defective human being. It makes you a highly adaptive survivor. You picked up these exact habits because, at one point in your timeline, they actually functioned. They successfully got you through a period of severe trauma, overwhelming stress, devastating heartbreak, or absolute chaos. But the environment has changed, and the heavy psychological armor that once protected you in a war zone is now the exact weight that is actively holding your head underwater and drowning you in peacetime. You aren't broken for having utilized them, but you will mathematically guarantee that you remain paralyzed and stuck if you continue to delude yourself into believing they are still saving you. So, what's the protocol? You immediately stop lying to yourself about the utility of your habits. You adopt a stance of gritty, surgical honesty. You hold up every single daily behavior and you ask a brutal question. Does this specific action genuinely recharge my cellular battery? Or does it merely keep me sedated and numb just long enough to survive yet another 24-hour cycle of a life I am not actually living? Because there is a massive structural difference between seeking temporary comfort and deploying genuine coping mechanisms. And the razor-thin line separating those two concepts is the exact geographic location where your true healing will finally commence. Now we are going to transition from diagnosis to execution. We're going to discuss exactly how to fiercely reclaim your stolen energy bandwidth without having to undergo a massive spiritual awakening, quit your corporate job, delete your identity from the internet, and move to a remote cave in the Himalayas. We are going to deploy real-world, highly tactical, messy life strategies. Because the ultimate objective here is not achieving pristine, flawless perfection. The objective is to permanently plug the leaks in your hull and finally start living. Let's cross that bridge right now. Tactical bandwidth reclamation. How to take your energy back without becoming a monk. All right, we have successfully dragged your most insidious energy drainers out of the shadows, exposed them to the harsh light of day, and ruthlessly roasted them like a late-night comedy special. So, what is the next actionable step? How the hell do you actually execute a tactical reclamation of your life force without dramatically burning your entire life to the ground and abandoning society? You don't need a profound, mystical, spiritual awakening. You need the deployment of aggressive, unapologetic boundaries. And I'm not talking about the cute, highly aesthetic self-care boundaries you post an infographic about on Instagram once and then immediately ignore in real life. I'm talking about the boring, deeply awkward, highly uncomfortable, sometimes guilt-inducing boundaries that feel physically sickening to enforce the first 5 times, but eventually taste like absolute, unadulterated peace once they settle into your reality. Let's systematically break down the game plan. Tactic 1. Deploy the word no as a complete, unjustified sentence. Oh, I can physically feel your internal people-pleaser instantly bursting into flames of panic just reading that. But listen to me very carefully. No is a grammatically complete, structurally sound sentence. Not, no, but maybe if I can shuffle my schedule later. Not, no, unless it is a massive emergency and you really need me to rescue you. Not, no, I am so incredibly, profoundly sorry. Please accept this lengthy 3-paragraph apology as a coupon for my soul. Just a firm, neutral, unmovable no. Every single time you force the word yes out of your mouth when your entire biological system is screaming to decline the offer, you are actively committing a robbery against your future self. You are stealing from that exhausted, depleted version of you who desperately needed just one single evening to breathe, to sit motionless on a couch, and to stare at a wall without the parasitic feeling of guilt aggressively gnawing at your ankles. Protecting your bandwidth requires the courage to disappoint others in the short term to save yourself in the long term. Tactic 2. Guard your morning brainwaves like your sanity depends on it. The very first physical object your hand touches upon waking from a sleep cycle should absolutely, under no circumstances, be your glowing digital rectangle. If the first neurological input your brain receives in the morning is a barrage of 17 unread notifications, 3 demanding missed calls, 2 devastating global tragedies, and a video of a hyper-optimized fitness influencer who woke up at 4 a.m., ran a half marathon, and built a startup before you even opened your eyes, guess what happens? Your entire day has been violently hijacked before it even began. Your brain transitions from the deep, restorative theta waves of sleep directly into the high beta, cortisol-flooded panic state of modern survival. You would never consciously choose to instantly open 40 heavy software applications on a clunky computer built in 2011 and genuinely expect it to function without instantly crashing. You must immediately stop doing the exact same thing to your fragile organic mind. Give your system 10 protected minutes. Just 10 minutes. 0 digital screens. 0 artificial noise. Physically stretch your limbs. Stand by a glass window and stare blankly out into the world like a deeply confused raccoon. Practice deep, intentional breathing. Allow your prefrontal cortex to successfully boot up and establish a baseline of equilibrium without being instantly subjected to a tidal wave of cortisol and algorithmic comparison. Tactic 3. Execute ruthless digital algorithmic curation. Unfollow the account. Mute the stories. Permanently exit the damn group chat. If a digital space, an app, or an individual's curated timeline consistently drains your energy reservoir, you do not owe them your precious, finite presence. If consuming someone's content reliably leaves you feeling small, highly anxious, physically inadequate, or completely invisible, you hold the absolute sovereign power to stop looking at it. Consider that highly successful, hyper-productive influencer you follow because you convinced yourself they help you stay inspired and motivated. If your actual visceral reaction to seeing their perfectly lit face on your screen is a deep sense of garbage-tier self-worth, that is not inspiration. That is psychological self-punishment wearing an aesthetic filter. You are entirely authorized to ruthlessly curate your digital environment as if your psychological survival depends on it, because in the modern attention economy, it literally does. Leave the toxic, gossiping group chat. Silence the notifications from that specific relative who only ever reaches out to demand emotional labor. Unfollow the fitness guru who possesses a 12-pack of abs but the personality of a wooden plank. Their digital ego is infinitely less important than your internal peace. Tactic 4. Elevate rest to a sacred, non-negotiable status. And let me be perfectly clear, I am not referring to the fake rest of lying on a couch, watching Netflix, and rapidly dual screening on your phone. I am talking about authentic, soul-repairing, entirely guilt-free, parasympathetic activating rest. I'm talking about the practice of non-sleep deep rest. Lying horizontally on your bed, eyes completely closed, phone powered off and placed in another room, staring into the darkness like the ceiling owes you a significant amount of money. Or taking a slow, meandering, physical walk outside with absolutely no destination, no step counter, and no podcast blasting in your ears. Or sitting in a chair in absolute silence and resisting the deeply ingrained urge to immediately fill the void with distraction. Here is the unvarnished reality of the situation. If you do not actively carve out and fiercely protect sacred spaces of rest, the external world will treat your finite daily energy like a free, all-you-can-eat buffet. Every corporation, every algorithm, every acquaintance will continue to pile demands onto your plate until there is absolutely nothing left of you but a skeletal frame and a heavily highlighted to-do list. Therefore, you must schedule rest into your calendar and treat it with the exact same gravity and respect as a high-stakes meeting with an incredibly important CEO. Because it is an incredibly important meeting. It is an appointment with your own survival. Tactic 5. Seize just 1 square inch of sovereign control. When faced with massive burnout, the instinct is to attempt a complete overnight overhaul of your entire existence. You do not need to fix the entire sprawling architecture of your life before sunset today. Attempting to do so will only trigger more paralysis. You only need to reclaim 1 single microscopic square inch of territory. Organize and tidy 1 tiny corner of your chaotic physical desk. Exercise your power to say no to 1 minor, insignificant obligation this week. Intentionally choose to drink a glass of water instead of automatically reaching for your 3rd cup of highly caffeinated anxiety juice just 1 time today. Delete 1 single application from your phone that consistently makes you feel like trash. Send 1 radically honest text message to a trusted friend saying, "Hey, I am not going to lie. I am going through a massive amount of mental friction right now." Authentic healing doesn't materialize in a massive, cinematic explosion of fireworks. It is quietly constructed in the tiny, almost invisible, mundane moments where you actively make the choice to prioritize yourself over the noise. Tactic 6. Build the endurance to tolerate disappointing people. I am going to deliver a harsh newsflash that will likely sting. When you finally begin to build walls and protect your peace, you are mathematically guaranteed to disappoint certain people. They will loudly complain that you have changed. They will accuse you of being excessively selfish. They will label you as cold, distant, or aloof. Let them. Allow them to hold whatever incorrect narrative makes them comfortable. You were not put on this earth to serve as an unpaid, permanent emotional support animal for the general public. You aren't a mechanical vending machine designed to dispense infinite yeses whenever someone pushes a button. You are completely authorized to organically outgrow relational dynamics that may have once felt like a safe harbor, but have now clearly mutated into suffocating cages. The individuals who possess a genuine, healthy love for you will understand the shift. Or, at the very absolute minimum, they will respect you enough to try to understand. The individuals who throw a tantrum and fall away are the ones who only valued you for the exhausted, highly compliant, people-pleasing utility you provided them. And I promise you, with every fiber of my being, losing those specific people is an immense, life-saving blessing, brilliantly disguised as a temporary heartbreak. Tactic 7. Form a deep, romantic alliance with boring. True, sustainable peace is not a glamorous, highly marketable aesthetic. It doesn't look like performing advanced yoga poses on a pristine beach in Bali while drinking a $30 adaptogenic smoothie out of a vintage mason jar. Sometimes profound peace looks incredibly boring. It looks like a Friday night with absolutely zero social plans. It looks like a fully stocked refrigerator, a smartphone permanently locked in Do Not Disturb mode, and sliding under your bed sheets at an aggressively early 8:30 p.m. No manufactured drama, no chaotic fires to extinguish, no external noise. Just you, existing safely and quietly within your own physical presence. Society has conditioned you to view that scenario as a failure, as boring. But it is not boring. It is the exact definition of nervous system regulation and healing. And I fully recognize that a deep part of your psyche might be terrified of this stillness. Because if your entire identity is built around constantly rushing, continuously fixing other people's crises, pleasing the masses, and flawlessly performing the role of the hyper-competent adult, who are you when the music stops? If you aren't actively being everything for everyone else, who is left in the room? You are. That is exactly who is left. The authentic, unmasked, profoundly real version of you. The version of you that genuinely deserves space, profound softness, and absolute silence. Not just the bare minimum required for basic biological survival. We are rounding the final corner now. Let's tie this entire conceptual framework together. And it's going to be the specific message that hits the hardest. It's the definitive reminder that you are not a fundamentally broken piece of machinery. You are simply an organism experiencing severe, chronic overstimulation. And the beautiful truth is, once you finally remember the identity of the person buried beneath all that chaotic noise, the entire trajectory of your life changes. Let's bring this massive ship safely back into the harbor. The ultimate reframe. You are not broken, you are just overstimulated. I want you to let these next 4 words sink deep into the marrow of your bones. You are not broken. Read that sentence again. Read it a 3rd time. I want you to vocalize it out loud. If you need to, desperately whisper it to that exhausted, terrified version of yourself who is currently curled up in a fetal position in bed at 2:43 a.m., staring blankly at the ceiling shadows, entirely convinced that there is a fundamental genetic defect isolating you from the rest of normal humanity. You are absolutely not broken. You are severely, chronically overstimulated. There is a massive, tectonic shift in paradigm between those 2 concepts. The word broken carries a heavy, fatalistic implication. It implies that something deep inside the core of your being is inherently wrong, permanently defective, and completely unfixable. It implies a moral or structural failure. But the concept of being overstimulated? That simply means there is too much volume, too much artificial noise, too much crushing societal pressure, too many unresolved tabs open in the limited RAM of your brain and your soul. It means there are far too many heavy, oppressive shoulds dictating your actions, too many unsolicited voices screaming in your ear, and a catastrophic deficit of pure, unadulterated silence. It means you are drowning in a sea of other people's opinions while starving for a drop of your own authentic truth. You must recognize the biological reality of your existence. You were never, ever evolutionarily designed to live at this terrifying velocity. None of us were. Your fragile, ancient human brain was not engineered to actively consume and process more raw, complex information before you finish your morning coffee than your ancient ancestors processed in an entire calendar year. Your central nervous system was absolutely not built to be violently hijacked by every single catastrophic global headline, every dopamine-draining app notification, and every passive-aggressive group chat message before your physical feet even make contact with the floorboards in the morning. You were not manufactured in a laboratory to be on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You were not designed to be endlessly available, flawlessly responsive, ruthlessly efficient, and constantly impressive. But we currently inhabit a deeply sick, highly distorted global culture that actively treats the concept of stillness as a moral failure. We exist in a matrix that aggressively rewards severe biological burnout and slaps the shiny label of ambition on it. We live in a society that loudly commands you to rise and grind, while your physical body is violently screaming for a moment of genuine rest. A society that threatens you to either keep up with the impossible accelerating pace or get left behind in the dust, while you are quietly, invisibly, disintegrating into millions of pieces entirely behind the scenes. So, what do? You conform. You push harder. You tighten the mask. You force a polite smile. You casually say, "I'm doing totally fine," despite the fact that your throat is tight with unshed tears and your eyes are heavy with profound exhaustion. You do whatever it takes to survive the social expectation. You become such an elite, Oscar-worthy performer of okayness that you genuinely forget what it actually feels like to be naturally, effortlessly okay. And when your biological vehicle finally breaks down on the side of the highway and screams, "Absolutely no more," your immediate, conditioned response is to assume that you are the fundamental problem. No, you are not the problem. The core problem is a highly dysfunctional world that actively rewards extreme overstimulation and brutally punishes any display of softness. A world that gives standing ovations to the burned-out executive and openly mocks the individual who dares to set a firm, healthy boundary. You are not weak for experiencing the crushing weight of being overwhelmed. You are not failing at life simply because your cognitive architecture is tired. You aren't crazy, fragile, or defective for desperately craving a quiet room. You are simply a biological human being, possessing a deeply sensitive nervous system that was never calibrated for this relentless manic pace. You possess a human heart that was not engineered for constant, exhausting, performative output. You possess a deeply neglected soul that has been quietly begging for a moment of stillness, only to be repeatedly ignored in favor of clearing an email inbox. And here is the most profound revelation you will encounter on this journey. Genuine healing doesn't mean you somehow magically mutate into a cold, unfeeling, hyperproductive cyborg who completely stops being sensitive to the environment. True healing means you finally start treating that deep sensitivity as if it is something incredibly sacred, because it absolutely is. Your crushing exhaustion is not a sign of failure. It is a manifestation of profound bodily wisdom. It is highly accurate biological data. It is your physical vessel firmly stating, "We cannot sustain this trajectory of existence any longer." It is your deepest intuition whispering that there is a vastly superior way to exist, not a way that makes you more productive to a corporation, not a way that makes you more impressive to strangers on the internet, but a way that is infinitely more true to your own nature. And that specific, undeniable truth? It has been sitting right there the entire time, buried under a mountain of artificial noise and societal expectations. It is the incredibly quiet part of your psyche that still desperately loves the sound of absolute silence. It is the part of you that still secretly dares to dream of a different life when you are completely alone and no one is watching to judge you. It is the part of you that still experiences a profound, childlike sense of awe when the chaotic world slows down just long enough for you to actually take a deep breath. It is the part of you that distinctly remembers the physical, resonant feeling of the last time you laughed a genuine, deep belly laugh, without simultaneously overthinking your posture or your to-do list. That part of you is still entirely intact. It is still you. So I need you to absorb this final message into your consciousness, because I swear to you, it is the single most important concept I will ever articulate. You do not require fixing. You are not a broken toy. You merely require finding. You need to be excavated from underneath the avalanche of deafening noise, rescued from beneath the paralyzing weight of fear, and pulled out from under the endless, suffocating pressure to constantly be more, when your current, authentic baseline is already more than enough. The time has officially arrived to terminate the exhaustion of the performance. Stop the vicious cycle of comparison. Stop the toxic, chemical, and digital numbing. Stop willingly leaking your precious, finite energy into the black hole of people, jobs, and algorithms that do not even possess the capacity to genuinely see you. It is time to initiate the journey back to yourself, back to your baseline of peace, back to constructing the kind of life that actually feels like a warm, safe home inside your own physical body. And that exact process begins right now, in this very second. It doesn't begin next Monday after you buy a new journal and establish a flawless morning routine. It doesn't begin after you finally get your entire life together. It doesn't begin after you successfully lose 10 pounds, or secure that elusive corporate promotion, or perfectly resolve all of your childhood trauma in a color-coded spreadsheet. It starts right now with one single, massive, intentional breath. It starts with setting one firm, unapologetic no. It begins with one highly conscious decision to completely let go of the exhausting, heavy avatar the world commanded you to be, and getting intensely, radically curious about the person you actually are beneath the armor. Because you are fundamentally not broken. You are sacred. You are wonderfully soft. You are biologically and psychologically wired for profound depth, not shallow busyness. And you are absolutely, unequivocally allowed to architect and live a life that aggressively honors that depth. So here are your final marching orders for the day. I want you to take this message, this exact realization, and I want you to send it to 3 specific people in your life that you love deeply. Send it to the ones who you know are walking around utterly exhausted, but who are desperately, flawlessly pretending they are fine. Send it to the individuals who automatically default to the phrase, "I am good," but who flash a rigid smile that entirely fails to reach the corners of their tired eyes. Send it to the people you objectively know are leaking their vital energy in the exact same silent, destructive ways you have been. Let's actively remind each other what the sensation of genuine, unfiltered oxygen feels like in our lungs again. Because we were absolutely not placed on this floating rock in space just to frantically survive the grueling mechanics of this life, pay bills, and die tired. We are here to deeply feel the texture of it. We are here to actually live it. We are here to walk each other back home to our truest selves, standing shoulder to shoulder, one deep, intentional, unapologetic breath at a time.